Hey, Bobby Manning here. Welcome to the Garn Report outside Celtics Media Day. Not what we were expecting at this Media Day to start off with the introduction of an interim Celtics head coach. But that's how this one got underway here with Joe Mazzulla heading to the podium. We had talked to him, head of Celtics Summer League. I think that's where we got to know him most, was when he led that team of Peyton Pritchard, Aaron Nesmith, Sam Hauser, and the rest summer ago. And now, after Ime Udoka's suspension, Will Hardy heading out to the Utah Jazz, he suddenly goes from the back of the Celtics bench to the head coach of this team, which is unbelievable. 34 years old. A lot of jokes about how he's younger than Al Horford. But he showed good poise up there. I thought addressed a lot of questions about not only the situation and how he's going to have to handle it with empathy and listening and healing and trust and all those different words he used, but also continuing to trust his players and moving forward with what Ime Udoka did. A lot to take from what he said here today. What was the biggest impression you had of Mazzulla?
A lot of what you said, but also just how everyone seems to have that positive relationship with him that extends beyond the basketball court. I think that was a common theme for a lot of these players. Obviously, Malcolm Brogdon just got here. Other guys are not quite familiar with him, but for the guys who are, it seems like it goes beyond basketball, which is a good thing. You want your team to want to fight for you, and obviously, I think this is one of those situations where players are going to say, look, we have to come together. We have to rally for coach because he's in a tough spot. This isn't ideal. It's obviously fortunate for him in terms of his coaching career, but none of this is ideal. No first-year NBA head coach wants to be put into a situation like this because it's really hard to see, to make that transition from one guy being the leader to another guy who was, like you said, essentially in the second row of this coaching staff last year. But that doesn't take away from the fact that these guys are willing to fight for him. All the positive quotes that came out of media day, I do think are genuine. I think they're sincere. Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart. I mean, these guys, they said nothing but positive things about him, but they also are understanding to the fact that none of this is ideal and that, they're eager to get to it and turn the page on what's been a horrific week in the sense of just trying to get answers and trying to figure out what happened.
Yeah, and he said whatever he's going to do is what's best for the players. And that means, I think, keeping a lot of Udoka's emphases in place, not changing the system too much. This isn't suddenly going to become the Mazzulla show. And I think that's what people misunderstood a little bit about him taking over. Was he hired by Stevens? Yes. Was he a holdover and not one of the people Ime Udoka hired? That's true, and maybe that's a concern, but at the same time, I understand at this point, hearing from everybody, why Brad Stevens said on Friday, this is the best guy for the job by far, because he's the one who's going to be able to maintain what was in place in the room there. And listen, there was discussion of should you bring in a more experienced head coach, and Mazzulla addressed that today, and he said, I'm not even thinking about that right now because we're just trying to put these players in a good place. And with our first video, all the stuff we talked about of do the players trust this process? What are they going to be able to rally around? Is there any skepticism about the fact that Udoka's gone? I think Mazzulla is a good person to go in there and say, I'm holding it down this year. Nothing's changing. I'm just going to move this ship forward, and I'm going to trust you guys to take on some leadership roles too.
Right. It eases the transition. And they did talk about potentially bringing in another assistant coach, but I'd be surprised if it's someone who's capable of being a head coach in the NBA.
Yeah, like Frank Vogel.
Exactly, because you don't want someone to be in that position that's going to overshadow, what's happening right now. And I think this is the easiest transition for the Celtics because not only do they know this guy, but it's very similar to what they went through last year. If you were to bring in a new head coach at this moment right now, a new voice, a new system, a whole new, because obviously a new coach would bring in his own coaching
staff.
Right, which wouldn't be fair to guys like Damon Stoudemire, who obviously didn't do anything in this whole Ime Udoka situation, and two, it wouldn't be fair for the players who, of course, trying to get back to the NBA Finals. 80% of this roster is back from last year, or even more than that. And I just think, again, it's the easier transition, but it also doesn't take away from what the focus is. That's what's making the decision that's best for the players, that's going to put them in position to compete and reach the NBA Finals.
Marcus Smart talked about that too. Here he is saying that it was important for a lot of those staff members to stay in place from last year and have that continuity.
Like I said, it'd been different if we had somebody new that, we did. We're trying to build that connection with him, whereas, Joe's been here. He knows the schemes, he knows the system, he knows the players. So it makes it a little bit more easier to adjust to a guy that's been here and knows it.
So the only other question we have in this coaching change is one of the first things I think a lot of people thought of should Brad have taken over this team again. Like, should he have come down, stabilized things, been the voice of the organization, kind of that bridge between the front office and the players? I'm not ruling that out because, listen, we don't know anything about Mazzulla. He could do a great job, could do a bad job. And at that point, does Stevens have to think about maybe stepping in and stabilizing things a little bit, or is he just going completely hands-off with this?
I wouldn't rule it out completely, but I'd be really surprised, honestly. I just think he's really comfortable in this position that he's in. I think the last 2 seasons really drained him out for obvious reasons. The demanding schedule, playing in the bubble, that quick turnaround into the following season, and the way that season played out, it just wasn't easy for him. And I think he's found a comfort zone in being in a position where he can help this organization in another way. And I think if they were to go that route in replacing Joe Mazzulla, obviously he'd have a huge say in it. And I think he'd rather be that guy to appoint another leader. But I mean, obviously we're getting ahead of ourselves a bit. We're talking hypotheticals here, but at the same time, I'd be really surprised if Brad would do what seems like Wick wanted him to do and regain that spot. I just think he lost that locker room a couple of years ago, and it's really hard to just come back and try to regain it and also be sort of a contrast to what they've been doing the last year. So I'd be really surprised.
Yeah, I think that's why he ultimately didn't do it.
It's so
just
different.
The visuals of it too,
Yeah.
Ime being pushed out, Brad coming back in. I don't think he wanted to deal with any of that. As well as, there's an uncertain future with this coaching staff as well beyond this that they'll address in time. We're, of course, brought to you by calm.com. You can head over there, calm.com/garden, get 40% off a premium subscription, sleep sounds, bedtime stories, yoga, meditation, and all the rest. And, of course, Athletic Greens as well, offering you 5 free travel packs when you get started with them. Vitamins, minerals, all in one powder you pour in your water. athleticgreens.com/garden. They're going to throw in 5 free travel packs as well as a year's supply of vitamin D. For Josue Pavon, Bobby Manning, John Zanis, who is here as well. We'll talk with him.
John had the questions pop. We'll get into it. Tune in, the Garden Report if you haven't seen it already, or if not, if you're watching this beforehand, 7 o'clock. We'll talk about John going into reporter mode today.
Yeah, 7 o'clock live Garden Report coming up. Tune in on CLNS Media and Celtics All Access and subscribe as well.